Okay. So we're here. This is Chalk Talk with Chuck, and this week I'm super stoked. I have on what is essentially the coolest person I know, a guy who reinvents himself at every minute possible, and someone who's going to impose a bunch of wisdom upon my listeners. This is Jack Arpert, a cousin to me. And Jack, how are you doing?
I'm doing super, Chuck. That's asking a lot of me to impose wisdom on all of your listeners, but I'll try my best.
Hey, man. I trust you to do so. And I think the first thing that would be crucial for everyone to sort of get to know who you are as a person is to ask you. I met you in 2014, 2015. You came to live in Park City, but how many places have you lived in since then?
Let's see. Well, after I lived in your bedroom in your basement while you were in college, I guess I lived there for about a year, and then I stayed in Park City for about 2.5 years. Then let's see, drove on a very, very low budget all the way to Gates of the Arctic National Park in northern Alaska. I spent the summer that year living out of that car in Alaska, drove it all the way back to New Jersey, where I spent the about 5 months saving as much money as I could living at my parents before going and living in first Thailand for a month, then Indonesia for the better part of 3 months, then India for I think like 5 months, Nepal for 2 or 3 months, back to India. So the better part of a year in Asia, and then I came back to New Jersey and found out why I'd been having so much trouble hiking in the Himalayas and had 5 tears repaired in my knee. So I lived in New Jersey for about 7, 8 months. From there, I moved to Telluride, Colorado for a year. And from there, I had a pretty crazy road trip and moved to Sitka, Alaska for a little more than 2 years, maybe 2 years, yeah. And then recently in January, I moved to Ventura, California in the middle of COVID.
Okay, so holy shit.
Yeah, so in that's all those places, I guess it's in 5, 6 years.
Yeah, I mean, so when you talk to anybody else who's lived on planet Earth for 5 to 6 years, they have gone to Disneyland maybe once with their family. So,
Can't say I've ever been there.
so, so, so I mean, you go on and when I've intersected with you several times through these periods, right? Obviously, you live in my parents' basement for a little bit. We intersect while you're in Park City, and then I live in New Jersey, across the street from you, essentially, while you're doing reconstructive surgery on your knee.
Yeah.
But while you're out in these areas, because it's interesting to think that you live in this area as American as it can be as far as the frontier landscape goes of Utah, and then you ship yourself out to an area like India. When you're in India, what are the things that most surprise you about not just landscape but culture and lifestyle?
You're definitely more taken aback by the culture and the lifestyle compared to the landscape. What I realized so quickly is that our sense of personal space and hygiene are drastically different than most people in India experience. And sure, there are parts of Mumbai and New Delhi and Hyderabad and like the cities where people live a lifestyle comparable to our cities in this country, but when you really get into what Indian life is, it's just like, you get on a bus that should seat 30 people and you're going to be on it for 12 to 20 hours and they've booked it for 65 people, and you just take turn, like you're sitting four across in a row, two people on each seat, and the whole aisle is packed, and you just kind of look
And
around.
everyone's
Yeah,
rotating.
you just take turns standing up, and And you realize quickly that like if we're just so accustomed to like waiting in a line or not really coming in close contact with each other, which has gotten even worse as of late. But like there, if
Right.
you don't push your way to getting your bag to the underside of the bus, you'll stand there all day as people just shuffle past you. And it's,
Holding your bag.
yeah, they're just used to living on top of each other because there's so many people packed into that country. It's just, I don't know. I came home and I had several new appreciations for life in this country, and yeah, I can't imagine what some of the people I saw have gone through in the last year during COVID. Because you see sometimes people like in a slum that all basically drink out of the same water cup out of what in our country would look like sewer water, and the cup just sits there, and they come by and dip it in and drink, and it's like a COVID nightmare.
Yeah, and I mean, like, surely you've gained a unique perspective out of your experiences. Not, I think a lot of people travel to these countries, but it's underrated because you lived in these countries. You didn't just go there, you lived there. And while you're there, like you said, you go to a place where the watering hole is what is sewer water here.
Yeah.
And now COVID's hit these areas, and you see these intense spikes in like COVID, and I don't want the interview to glean too much on the modern COVID take,
Yeah, let's not do that.
but India, yeah, let's not do that. India is an interesting area because it is so overly populated. And is there any, particular experience you had there where you're interacting with maybe village children or, people who live there every day where you're like, holy fuck, their life must have changed drastically because of the current situation?
Oh, for sure. I was at this bus station in the middle of nowhere. I was riding like 5 buses that day, really getting lost and figuring it out and trying to get to this village where I was going to volunteer. And I saw a kid get hit by a bus, and the kid definitely died. And it
Holy
made
shit.
me realize like when you have that many people in a place and you're just so used to the masses, the value of life is so different. Like within minutes rather, the kid was in a tuk-tuk with the mom screaming, they were gone, and life just carried on. Whereas here, there'd be news crews and caution tape, and it was just like life just carried on, and this kid just died in front of our eyes.
Yeah. Holy
Yeah,
shit.
yeah, yeah.
Wow. I mean, and that's how things are, and it's not like they're valued any differently, but it's like the appreciation for the moment is taken differently almost.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely is a different valuation on life, though. Like, you still see parents there that will have 10, 13 kids because they just assume that half of them won't make it into
Holy
old age,
shit.
and they're going to have as many as they can so that somebody will care for them later in life.
Right. Right. I mean, it's wild, and and I think one thing that the reason that I wanted to do this interview so badly is because you have uniquely experienced all these things firsthand. You visited them from a very genuine area. And we've talked a lot about how you recreate yourself to do these things. So to pull it back to more of like a domestic standpoint, what are the jobs that you have been doing to fundraise yourself to get through to these points?
Yeah.
You're constantly reinventing yourself, and it's something that I think a lot of people do for a passion, but you do it on the daily. So what's it like? What are the jobs that you're finding yourself shuffling through?
Well, it's funny because I had a friend out here visiting me, from a good high school friend, a couple weeks ago, and he was talking about how he had just reinvented his career. He'd worked for one sort of career for 6 years, and then basically started back at the bottom. And I was encouraging that, but I was thinking, I was like, I do that like every 3 to 6 months to a year. It's
Right.
just, I don't know. Like I built a little resume in my head the other day, and it's like I've been
This thing's
uh,
your resume has to be deeper than the Mariana Trench, dude.
yeah, nobody would hire me. um, let's see. I've served table. Oh, I've worked at restaurants. I've been a bartender. I've served tables. I in Colorado. I worked with my friend who's got a leather studio, so we were leathersmithing. Um, I was a I worked for the Forest Service in Alaska, building bridges and cabins and staircases in the rainforest. Um, also in Alaska. I was a mountain goat Sherpa goat
And we're
packer.
gonna talk about that. Don't you
Yeah.
worry. We'll get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, let's see what else. I've been a lifeguard. I was a ski instructor. I was a snowmobile guide. I now am a shipwright. That was my most recent undertaking, and I'm gonna go with that for a while.
Yeah, and I think I think that's an underrated skill, shipwriting. I think it's something that's really cool that you've been doing.
Yeah, well, I got really into building things when I built that crazy camper on my truck, and I
Yeah,
realized that my favorite hours were spent creating something with my hands and figuring out what's going to work and how to make it work and learning new things and I got to thinking. I was like, what if I can build boats, like if you can build something that's aerodynamic and perfectly sound and it floats and it's got all these crazy angles and you can learn to manipulate, wood and other materials in such a way, then I can build anything. It's like, my tree houses will be
right.
crazy, my campers will be crazy. So that was.
And I think that, I mean, I think that converts to so many other things. Like you said, my tree houses, my campers, those kinds of things have become increasingly popular, especially with
Yeah, and
COVID.
the neatest part about this latest undertaking, the boat building, it was that when you really, commit to something that feels like your passion is all into it, it's, I don't want to use the word manifestation, but like the doors open in front of you when you're in the place you're supposed to be. And I had this
Yeah.
crazy. I moved from Alaska down to California, and I was gonna just find someone who was gonna teach me how to build boats. And yeah, and so I finally convinced this old man who was restoring old wooden boats to hire me, and I worked with him for a couple months. And then I was getting my hair cut because I had hair down on my shoulders and I was sanding so much, and I was always gnarly. And the lady cutting my hair hears my story and it's like, "Oh, my brother-in-law is like a premier boat builder here in town. You should meet him." And a week later, he
Of
calls
course.
me and offers for me to come down and check out what they're doing, see if I might be interested in working there. And then he just drops casually that one of the projects they're working on right now, they're finishing up a boat build they've been working on with Jay Nelson, who my jaw just sunk. Like,
I mean, had to hit your
yeah, because I'm
knees.
sitting in a camper with it's a '79 Blazer with a wooden cedar shingled tiny home on the back that's modeled after everything Jay Nelson has been doing for the last 10 years that I've been watching and like wanting to be him.
Obsessing over.
Yeah, so I get to pull up there in that, meet my hero, get a job, immediately start working with him, become friends with him, and like it's out of a dream. And it's like I never felt so convinced that every decision I'd made up to then put me in the right place where I needed to be.
And I mean, it's really cool because you've gained yourself this opportunity to not only, like you said, land in an area where you feel like, you're in the perfect space where you want to be, but you have all of these unique skills, and I think there's this big loss, and we've talked about it a little bit, where everyone in America is buying a Sprinter van and remodeling it and taking on the country, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Right. And everybody in America is,
Everybody that has
becoming
$100,000.
an outdoorsman. Right. Anybody who makes an affordable living who can install Wi-Fi into their mobile van is going out and doing it and taking on the world. And to some aspect, that's cool. You're experiencing nature. But at another aspect, you're a fucking poser loser.
I wasn't
And
gonna say it.
I'll say it. I'll fucking say it. You're a poser. You're a loser. You're a pussy.
Okay.
And you're not doing it for the truth. And Jack, you're doing it for the truth. And you've been doing it for the truth for a long time. And I want to pry a little bit more into the Alaska
Sure.
experience
That
as you
was
were there, and Alaska is like the fucking and when they say the last
it
frontier,
truly is.
they mean it, and it truly is. And you're out there, you're living in the bush, you're a Sherpa, you're somebody cutting trail, and I just want to kind of know a little bit more about like what it's like to fucking be a true Alaskan, which it seems like you were.
The coolest part about living in Alaska, and it has helped me in so many other regards, is that if there's something that you want to be able to do, it's not like you just hire somebody to do it for you. Like you don't just buy your Sprinter van. Like you fucking buy the lumber and you start building. Like you have to learn how to
Right.
go fish and you have to learn how to can your salmon. You got to learn how to shoot a gun because you're going to be walking around like grizzly bears every day. And if you want to eat meat that isn't shipped up from Seattle and overpriced and low quality, then you're going to learn how to go hunt a deer. And I never thought I was going to be a hunter in my life, and the experience of supplying myself with meat and you know,
Especially because you're out in Sitka. You're not fucking out in like Anchorage, right?
yeah,
You're not in like mainland Alaska. You're out in Sitka, so you're like out like fucking doing it, right?
yeah, like you got to ride most places. You got to ride a boat in treacherous waters where if you fall in, like you're probably going to die. And then you get off on an island and you hike across it, and then you're like, it's just yeah, you have to work for it, and then you got to climb up a mountain and sit there in the rain all day and try to shoot a deer and then carry it back. It's yeah, you earn it, and it's empowering to supply yourself with food. It's a
Yeah.
natural element of humanity that many of us will never make contact with again.
And and like you said, I don't think and I'll probably never make contact like you made it out there in the bush. But what's the longest point of time you spent out in the bush? No contact, nothing. You're hunting. You're providing yourself with your own food.
Um, well, I worked a job where I would go out for pretty much the whole week every week, and sometimes for 2 weeks.
Jesus.
Um, the longest, gnarliest thing was the one you want to talk about. We were out for 7 days. We came back to town once to dry out because we probably would have died if we didn't. But yeah, I mean, never really more than a week or two at a time. But
Yeah, but I mean, you say it so low pitched, but you know, people don't go a week without a chip, and
I
you're
took this
you know
survival class where they took us out and you had a small Ziploc bag and only a third of it could be food, and you're going to be out for 2 days and you had to build your own shelter, keep
Jesus.
yourself warm, and learn what you could forage so that you could feed yourself more than the third of a Ziploc bag. That was pretty cool.
Wow. And
Yeah.
that was all in Alaska?
Yeah, which is so like there's so especially up there in the rainforest, but there are foods around us almost everywhere we live, unless you live in Manhattan, that you can go out and find. People just don't really know what's naturally edible most places they live.
Yeah, I mean, I can safely say that I'm not fully versed in what's naturally edible to me.
Yeah, even when I lived at your parents' house, I had no idea. Now I know I could, go find some mushrooms and burn areas and
I want to hear the Sherpa story in Alaska.
all right. So, of all the places I've told you I've lived and all the jobs I've done, this was definitely the nearest I came to death. And I'm now already thinking that I don't really want to show my mom this podcast because she doesn't know this story, but now she will. Um, so I was,
Hygiene.
I'm a close your ears. I was between two jobs. My Forest Service job was ending for the season, and I had about a week, 10 days until I was starting a new job with the Sitka Conservation Society. And I had been talking to this guy who has a hunting outfit for the better part of 2 years and saying I was interested. And he asked if I wanted to go on a goat hunt as a packer. So
Sure.
I signed up, and I was sold it as I'll pay for 7 days. Usually we get a goat in 3, pay for the whole week. And
Money.
We didn't get a goat in 3 days.
Of course not.
So in fall in Sitka, Alaska, where it rains all the time, it rains especially hard. And for 7 days, it was the guide, the client. The client was in his 50s and lived in Colorado, and he goes on a big hunt every year, and never didn't think he was going to be able to do a goat hunt again. And honestly, he wasn't in shape to do a goat hunt this time. And we climbed mountains every day, and I'd never been so wet. I'd never been so cold. And we were out for like 3 days. Then we came back to dry out. We went back out again the next morning, like got in a boat, then get on an ATV on a different island, then hike a few miles, then set up camp, then hike up a mountain, look for goats. And the problem was the guy was older. And by the time we got up high enough to where we'd see mountain goats, because these things live in the most treacherous parts of the mountain, like in the cliffs. It's really wild to watch them hop around. But by the time we'd get up there, it would be too late in the day, because you're not going to shoot one at 3 o'clock and then not get to it until 4:30.
Yeah.
And then cut it up. But that's exactly on the 7th day. We had dragged this guy through. Just like, I was impressed that he even lasted this long, and we decided to do exactly that. We were at like 4,000 feet. Camp was at like 1,500 feet. We shot a goat from 515 yards away. It's a crazy scene.
Like nailed it.
No, like hit it, and then it started doing exactly what you don't want it to do. Like once they're wounded, they'll start trying to throw themselves off a cliff, and then you won't be able to recover them.
Right.
And so he ended up getting 2 more shots into it and dropping it in a recoverable spot, and which is insane from 515 yards. But by the time we got to it, it was beginning to get dark. By the time you cut up and debone a 300-pound animal and load it into your pack, it's now like 8:30 at night, and it's pitch black.
Yeah.
And it's snowing. It started snowing, and it was like the first snow of the year.
Christ.
So it's like slick, dead grass, and we're on the side of a mountain, and we have we packed light. Like our camp was down, so we didn't have a tent, we didn't have our sleeping bags. It was down 2,500 feet. And we start coming down, and
how long is that hike?
Yeah, I didn't anticipate. It probably took us 4 or 5 hours to get up there, just because it's rugged terrain and there's no trail. Like we're looking for. I mean,
you're playing out.
And yeah, I expected it was going to take longer than that, but we had gone for maybe 2 hours and hadn't covered what had taken us 25 minutes in light.
Jesus Christ.
Because you've only got your headlamp circle and you've got like a GPS reading, but you're like, you just get clipped out, and then you're backtracking. And anyway, at one point, and I have 175 pounds on my back.
Oh.
And so does the guide. And then the client maybe has like 75, 100 pounds on his back. But at one point the guide slipped, and we hadn't put crampons on. Didn't think we needed them. It wasn't like snowy. And he slipped, and it was just crazy how quickly when he hit the ground with all that weight, he started sliding. And he only slid like 15 yards and came to a stop. And I like, we were frightened. And so I'm like collecting myself, with the client. And I didn't take 2 more steps, and I slipped. And as soon as I hit the ground, I was like at terminal velocity, sliding so fast. And I had an ice axe, and I tried to self-arrest, like dig it into the side of the mountain. And I was so heavy and moving so fast already that it ripped upward out of my hands.
Oh my Christ.
Knocked the headlamp off my head. And I was sliding in the darkness, and I slid over 100 yards. And it was so long that I was conscious of the fact that I was going to die. Like I was going to go off a cliff, or I was going to hit a tree.
Christ.
I was clawing at the ground trying to stop myself. And then I went off something. I got airborne, and I was fully aware of the fact that I was dead. Like I thought I was going to slam hundreds of feet to my death. And I slammed down like maybe 8 feet. Luckily landed on top of the pack full of meat, and like only really banged up my elbow. And I was just like kissing the ground, screaming in victory, but also still so afraid. And screaming back to the guys because they thought for sure I was dead. They just saw me go rocketing off into the darkness.
Right.
And had to then get my headlamp out. Get my cell phone light out and track back up and find my headlamp, find my ice axe, get back to the group. and then we have to continue down. And we continued
Which
for
is like
another
another like couple hours.
yeah, and we went for another like 3 hours, and we're still so far from camp, and we were just all in such fear and tired and wet.
Half adrenaline, half just like, how the fuck am I alive right now?
Yeah, and how the fuck am I going to keep going? Like every step now, after a slip, I got my crampons on, and every step is thought about,
Right.
And then we ended up deciding that it was too sketchy to keep going because we were too tired and getting clipped out. And so we pulled the bloody goat hide out, and the three of us, with backpacks full of meat, a bloody goat hide as a blanket, we shivered under it, each holding our gun because you're in brown bear country.
Yeah, you're in bear country.
And you're literally just a pile of meat. And we waited for the sun to come up and then kept coming down.
No,
and I never felt so powerful that next day.
Dude.
But yeah, it was pretty. I had nightmares about it for a while.
I can't imagine.
Every day I wrote the story over and over again, just trying to I don't know, just get it out of my head.
Yeah, you're like trying to unlive but relive the narrative at the same time. I mean, dude, holy shit. I mean,
yeah, my mom's gonna freak.
Are you fucking Luke Skywalker?
I actually have a pretty Luke Skywalker picture.
You're sleeping in the skin of this animal you just slayed.
Yeah, blood side up,
blood
fur on you. I thought I had a rock under my knee all night, and then I realized it was the skull.
Oh my Christ. I mean, you had to be, not only are you cold as, I mean, I'm sure after you're
freezing because you're soaked to the bone in sweat.
Yeah. After you went through the fall, you didn't feel any freezing, any of that. All you felt was
trust me, I felt freezing.
Did you? Dude, I don't know. I mean, I've obviously never come that close to death. But I was like, when I'm living this story through what you're telling me, Jesus Christ, I wouldn't be cold. I'd just be happy.
Yeah, I was pretty happy. We then hiked all the way down, ate a fat 2 backpacker meals each, then hiked out. I got to the ATV'd out, got on the boat, and when I stepped off that boat and walked up to my house, I felt like I could literally flip cars over. I felt like I
bet you felt like the king of the world, dude.
Yeah.
Huh. Jesus Christ. So that's intense.
I just got asked by that guy if I wanted to go do a caribou and a moose hunt in northern Alaska. I really want to, but I also kind of question his decision-making process.
Yeah, no, I mean, naturally, hey man, are we gonna be shooting a caribou at 4 p.m. before sunset?
Luckily, caribou aren't on the top of the mountain, so I was a little safer about it. But I don't know. I liked the guiding experience, but I'd rather be in charge. I don't like being in a dangerous situation where someone else's decisions put my life in danger.
Especially because, I mean, it's underrated, and I think people take this for granted, especially, where I live now. And I think it's a fun contrast between what you do and where I live and all of these things, right? Which is why I think our friendship is so cool and unique. But people here are like, yeah, man, I'm going to hunt. And I'm going on this hunt in Yellowstone or in Wyoming, and I've got this guide, and he's got a few guys that are coming with me, and we're gonna do the whole thing, right? And sure, granted, the guy that paid for that hunt that you went on where you slept under the skin is a little different, but these fucking pricks out here who are who are like, I'm going on a hunt, aren't really going on a hunt. And you're doing all the work,
It's just like when I went to the Himalayas, and Austin and Philip came out to meet me, and Julie was there, and we started 2 days before Lukla, which is a week below Lukla, and we hike all of our gear, and then you get up there, and it's like you've been hiking for over a week, and all these people fly in, and they pay some guy in flip-flops literally nothing to carry way more gear than they need. Right. And they're walking along the trail with just their water bottle in their hand. And they're like, oh, I went to Everest Base Camp. And it's like, you literally walked with nothing in your hand, had somebody cook for you every night, like carried nothing, and it's like you can't claim to have accomplished something that you didn't earn on your own.
Yeah, and I think there's like a huge thing around that right now. Where people are just like, and it's so fun, and that's why like I fucking love knowing you and being able to interview you about these things because you're experiencing it for like the truth from the first hand. And there's all these people out there who are like, look at my fucking Instagram or my Facebook or my YouTube channel about how I went to this and did all of this. And it's like,
Yeah, and they don't
you
show
know,
the poor
yeah,
20 year old kid with like 500 pounds on his
yeah,
back.
they don't show the Tibetan kid who's been carrying your pack for 14 and a half miles that has
Every day for 2 weeks.
right. So, you have some great photos, the highest man on earth being my favorite. But
I love that photo.
oh, I mean, what a photo, dude. Um you hiked all of these insane and you've summited some insane mountains. Do you have like, a specific mountain that you've summited that meant more than anything to you?
Um, yeah, I don't even know what it's called, but Austin and I and another friend, Tyler, uh, we were engaged to the Arctic. And that first Alaska trip where Austin came out to Park City, we loaded up my Ford Escape and we
Yeah,
drove
I remember
from
that.
Park City to Gates of the Arctic. We had like a $2,000 budget. I ended up putting $1,000 on a credit card, but like even still, that was all just gas.
In the
We were living off
Falcon.
like yeah, Millennium Falcon. We were living off like rice and onions, and that's how I became the queso bandito because we'd go into a store to like buy the cheapest veg we could, and I would steal a block of cheese to spice up the dinner. And like we go up to Gates of the Arctic, and everybody that we talk to is like, "You're going into Gates of the Arctic, and you don't have a gun." I'm like, we can't afford a gun. Like I can barely afford food. And we hike in and like immediately encounter a huge grizzly bear, and then we just keep going and we make camp one day. Like we'd seen huge wolf tracks and like we were just out in like you're above the Arctic Circle. You're on the edge of the Arctic, and
Right.
Austin and
And
I one
like
day were
and
just
like
like,
you say it so casually, but you're also just kind of improving.
oh yeah, absolutely improving. Like I had never done any off trail guiding yourself with a map and a compass before I was doing it on Alaska, which was pretty crazy. And yeah, and then one day we just were looking up at this peak and we're like, we're gonna get up there, and it just broke it all wide open for me. It's like you don't need a trail, you just need wherewithal. You need to be confident, and you need to be smart, and you need to read the landscape, and you need to find the best route and go for things
How
that.
long was that hike? How many days? Do you remember? Or was it a day
Well,
or
we were in Gates of the Arctic for like 7 or 8 days, but the hike, like we set up a base camp. We left in the best part about being up there in the summertime is you're so far north that the sun doesn't set. So
right?
we'd be fishing sometimes and be like, "What time do you think it is?" Oh, maybe it's noon. It's like 4 o'clock in the morning, and you just kind of sleep when you're tired. And so like that hike probably took us like a 20-hour round trip, but
Jesus.
and yeah, but like once you go for something that you've never done before and you find yourself capable, and then you can apply that to totally different things. And it's like years later I wanted to buy a 40-year-old truck, and I knew nothing about auto mechanics. And I bought a 40-year-old truck, sold my perfectly reliable 5 6-year-old truck, and blew the engine out of it trying to drive it to Alaska. And then I decided
Right.
I was going to learn everything I needed to about that truck. And now, like 3 years later, I'm pretty handy. I change everything out myself and pretty much changed all the parts in that thing. And then I decided I was going to build a camper on it. And you just start doing things, and you realize you
And you
can.
think and do you think that all stems from, your exposure to things like summiting this
Yeah, it's
mountain?
just going for things out of your comfort zone that you didn't know you were capable of doing until you just went for it.
I mean, it's cool cuz you're constantly doing it. You're constantly, you know, uh putting yourself in situations where it's new. And
I
it's,
didn't even know what
different.
port and starboard were 6 months ago, and I decided I was going to be a boat builder. And now
Right.
I'm like full blown building boats. Like I'm going to start next week building an entire boat by myself.
And the next thing you know, you're going to be doing it for tons of people. And you're going to
Yeah.
be in Alaska. Or not only that, you know what you're going to do, dude? You're going to fucking say, I'm done building boats, dude. I'm going to go build X. Or I'm going to
Yeah.
fucking go surf
I'm going to build some
instruct in
crazy
Southern
stuff, Charlie. I got
California.
some crazy ideas that
Do you have some
I'm not
shit in
ready.
your brain?
Oh yeah, it's like every day that I'm building, I just get these new ideas, and they're all getting logged. And they will all be built.
Yeah, I mean, it's fucking awesome. Um, is there a particular thing? Because I think, Jack, talking to you, you're so casual. You're such a calm guy. And you're also very welcoming, and you give this aura off about, like, anybody can do what I do. I just do it because I love it, right? Um, I think there are a lot of people now in America, and, that I grew up with, that at least maybe they pretend to be you, or they want to be what you do, or they want to do the things that you do and be a person like you. What's the advice you would give to somebody who is truthfully looking to live a lifestyle like yourself?
You can't pretend to chase after your dreams. You can want to chase after your dreams, or you can go for it. It's like I did that for a while, and I realized nothing gets done unless you do it. Like you can't just say I'm going to be a writer. I did that for a while. It's like I'm going to be a writer, and then I just didn't write. And you have to set your goal and just stop wasting time on stuff. Like I still constantly kick my own ass when it's like you haven't written in a week, or yeah, your projects are sitting there. Or like you can't just go through every day and not pursue what you desperately want to accomplish. Like nothing gets done unless you do it.
Fuck yeah. No, I mean, and I think that's an important notion, right? Because there's a billion people out there who pretend, for me, like, obviously I love fucking talking to people and doing the podcast thing, and I just started doing it. And
Yeah, because we talked about it
yeah,
years ago, and then one day I saw you post a podcast, and I was like, "Hell yeah, Charlie's
yeah, I
fucking
mean, I just
doing it!"
kind of went for it, right? Because, like you said, you can talk
Yeah,
about how you want to do it, and you can say how you want to do it, and you can post on social media so much about how you want to do it. But
yeah, and if you don't do something because you're worried about it flopping and like
right,
you blow it, then you obviously don't care enough
right,
about
then
it.
who
Like
gives
if
a
you're
shit,
not
right?
willing to try, then stop
Yeah,
lying to
and if
yourself.
you're not also willing to take risks, does it piss you off at all, or does it make you happy that people want to live like you live?
I mean, I don't want anyone to live like I live. I want people to live how's going to make them happy. I can't imagine that anybody else out there would be happy driving 45 miles an hour in an old piece of shit truck down from Alaska to California and like roughing it. And like I get pleasure out of the struggles,
You
but
love every moment of it, but I think
yeah.
there are people out there that, like, truthfully, dude, at the heart of what they want to do, they just want to be like Jack Arpert. And I mean, they don't know you, but they want to say that they're like that. I mean,
Yeah. Well, the way I see it is like I wake up every day and I become the person I want to be. You can think about what you wish you were doing, or you can literally go through like you don't have to there are no
right.
steps laid out for you. You have to just guide your life. You have to do the things that are going to make you in the person you want to be. So I wanted to be someone who knew how to build boats, and I
And you learned it.
fucking stalked boat builders and begged people, and it ended up falling in my lap from the person I didn't call. It's like when you commit to making something happen for yourself and you drive at it however you can, however you think you can accomplish it, it will probably happen for you.
I mean, it's fucking cool, dude. And I mean, that message applies to everything. And people miss it, man. They miss it by a mile.
And it's important to remember that, like, just because you've been like my buddy, just because you've been doing something for 6 years, you're not even 30. Like,
Right.
even if you're 60,
You're not perfecting a
I'm about
craft.
to buy a keyboard and teach myself how to play the piano. It's like, you don't, just because you didn't learn an instrument as a kid doesn't mean it's too
Right.
late ever. Just because you studied something, like I studied film, and I have never worked a job that regards to screenwriting. And that's what I studied. It's like, you don't just have to judge yourself on your past. You can constantly reshape your
Constantly.
future.
I'd love to talk to you about what you're reading.
All right.
And I mean, it's an underrated
Oh,
portion
yeah.
of the Vagabond lifestyle, but
That's
it's your favorite, and we've both probably been reading some interesting shit. So let's exchange some reading stories.
Yeah. Well, what are you reading?
Recently, so I took a lot of responsibility after the Black Lives Matter movement and all of that. So I've been reading, I read you gave me for Christmas the what is it?
Indigenous
People's History, and I got the Latinx and African American history.
Latinx?
Yeah, so they have a Latinx, and it's like kind of slash African American history of America. It's the same publisher.
Cool.
It's not the same author. Great book.
Cool.
If you want to expose
check that
yourself,
one out.
yeah, it's great. I'll give it to you when I see you next. I've got it on the shelf.
I'll see you in 3 weeks.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'll be seeing you in New Jersey, so I'll give it to you there.
Yeah.
Great book.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic read,
Cool.
super smooth. And
You reading any more Cormac McCarthy?
I haven't read any McCarthy. I read All the Pretty Horses, which is,
nice.
I mean, come on, man, what a book. I mean,
the way that guy writes about desert landscapes
is unbelievable. Even in a time period that he didn't live in. You know what I mean? Like, when you're reading All the Pretty Horses, like, that's a landscape that he never experienced.
That's such a good point. Because, like, Ed Abbey, he's writing about looking out at.
Right.
He's writing about, Cormac McCarthy's writing about, early 1900s, these kids going down to Mexico on horses, and the landscape is barren,
Yeah.
It's like,
and it's like,
it's something he's
like
never
the fucking Dust Bowl, and this dude is,
and he writes about it in such a way that you can see it playing in your head.
and it's so weird because, like, obviously it takes a little bit of time to adjust to reading McCarthy because of the way that he writes dialogue, because there's no parentheses. And there's none of that stuff. But man, the picture painting is perfect. It's fucking perfect.
Oh, dude, now that you've gotten into Native American history, you got to read Blood Meridian.
Oh, I know. I have to read that book. It's on my shelf.
It is gory, man.
Is it dark?
Oh, yeah. Darkest Cormac I've read.
Worse than The Road.
Yeah.
Damn, dude. The Road was heavy.
Yeah.
What have you been reading?
Let's see. Right now I'm reading a really cool book by Christian Beamish, who's actually a surfboard shaper and he shapes boards in a storage container, like a shipping container, at our fiberglassing boatyard.
No kidding.
And he used to be the editor for Surfers, or associate editor for Surfers Journal, and his book is called Voyage of the Cormorant, and it's about him in the early 2000s building this like Viking ship style, no motor. I think it's like 17 feet, skinny. It's got sails and oars, and he rowed it. He did several trips, practice rounds around the Channel Islands out here, but then like down the coast of Baja, and just an epic journey of one man on a vessel he built with no motor, just, faring the elements. He kind of bounces around through his process. I'm about halfway through. I like carry a book around, and then I leave it in a backpack, and then I'm like halfway through probably 9 different books right now. But yeah, he's talking about just the process of, like, he's got this great job where he's the editor for the most legendary surf journal out there, and it's not fulfilling him. Like, the coolest thing he talks about is wanting, which I've shared with him. It's like, I moved to Alaska for similar reasons, wanting to tap in to all the elements of life that man knew for the entirety of humankind until the last few hundred years, like faring the elements, living off the land, like getting your own food, just ensuring your own safety from the elements every day. And it's such an empowering, any way you go about experiencing that, it's an
Yeah.
element of life that we're not connected to.
And I mean, obviously you've referenced your ADHD sort of style of reading. Is there anything else you're reading right now that's just like super empowering for you?
Yeah. I went down in relation to another book I sent you, In Dubious Battle.
I love it,
um,
man.
I watched this movie Trumbo. Have you seen that?
No.
It's Bryan Cranston and John Goodman, and it's a true story. It's about McCarthyism, essentially, when Dalton Trumbo, who's played by Bryan Cranston,
Okay.
was a screenwriter, like highly renowned screenwriter in Los Angeles, and was advocating for the strikes of the working people, because he realized that like these people that worked in the studios weren't being compensated. Yeah. And so even though he was on the opposite end, like he was wealthy and well off, he was, sort of rabbling the communist rabble. And at that time, he got blacklisted, and he got put on trial in front of, like, he got put on trial in the Senate and was blacklisted from Hollywood.
No, I mean,
and then ended up winning Academy Awards, like
it's like
under
Arthur
aliases.
Miller.
Yes, but so that just spiraled me off. Like, there's certain elements of history that you hear something about and you look back and you're like, why the hell did we learn about that so vaguely? Like, what was the fact that our government was so afraid at one point that communism was going to rise from within, and like we were going to have a Soviet-style uprising here? It's and then we don't learn about that anymore.
Well,
it's
and like
there was
when they teach you about it, it's like a footnote.
Yeah, and it's like I feel we've been kept so blindly ignorant about what really goes on in Russia, and we don't learn anything about Russian history, yet they're like our most significant counterpart in this world. And it by doing so, we have this like fear of what we don't know.
Yeah.
And so I went down a real wormhole. Like, first I read J. Edgar Hoover's book, Masters of Deceit, which was literally the head of the FBI or the CIA trying to convince the American people not to fall for the guise of communism. And so it's like, that's a very real fear.
I mean,
that we were going to...
And J. Edgar Hoover was a fucking weird dude.
Yeah. I read another great book about him that you definitely would like, also about Native American history, Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh.
And Scorsese's coming out with a movie about it that has De Niro and DiCaprio.
Okay, I've been hearing about that.
Yeah, it's David Grand, same guy who wrote Lost City of Z.
I've been doing like a deep fantasy dive, man. Did a lot of like Dune reading.
Well, I heard on your other podcast you were talking to your buddy in the band about that.
Yeah.
I want to read Dune.
Oh, dude, you'd fucking.
But then
love it.
I just went down such a communist wormhole. So after the J. Edgar Hoover book, I started reading Trotsky's book about the first 5 years of the Communist International.
Okay.
And it was like the opposite. It was, it was the communists in Russia trying to convince people internationally to fall for
communism.
To fall in with communism.
Yeah.
And so just interesting to get it on both sides.
I think the most unique thing about reading about these two cultures, right, where you go from like Hoover convincing people not to be about communism, and then you go to this Russian point of view where it's about communism, is that it's truthfully separate culture and ideology at its core.
Oh yeah.
There couldn't be two different ideologies that separate themselves more at their core than these two ideas.
And it's just so cool to hear like both sides talk about the other side, because it's like Trotsky's shedding such a good light on it, and then J. Edgar Hoover's like, that's the worst possible lifestyle you could ever live. Like, here's all the pitfalls, and it's like we've always learned history that way. Like, traveling has shown me that too. Like,
yeah,
we've learned world history from our perspective, and then you go to other countries and they learn the same world history but without the American twist on it. where it's like,
Yeah, I mean
God,
they get the European or Russian or African or Indian or Indonesian twist, right?
yeah, and then it's like, then it just helps you question your nationalism. Like, we look at the world the way we've been told.
It's funny. You're such an avid reader, and you've turned me on to so much good reading in my life. And
Well, when you're living in a truck, you have lots of
you have
time
a
to
lot of
read.
time to read. Uh, any book that you've been meaning to get to that you haven't yet?
Oh man, I have shelves of books I've been meaning to get to that I haven't, because
The
I am
most
a
pertinent.
used book addict. Let's see. I've been wanting to reattempt this book called The Future of Life.
Okay.
Uh, yeah, who's that by? It's on my shelf, but
Yeah, step
I
away
got
if you
this
need to
book
look
for
at
the
it.
no, I got this book for the first time like in high school, and I started playing, and it was just too advanced for my brain at that point. But it's by Edward O. Wilson, and that'll probably be my next read. Yeah.
And is it what's the nature of it?
Well, let's see. Harvard biologist E.O. Wilson.
Fiction,
He
nonfiction? Where are we living?
well, I I really don't know. I
It's
have
just a book that
like a
exists in your
hundred
aura.
books in my room, and that's the one calling me.
I love it,
Yeah,
man. Yeah, I mean,
yeah.
I've
And
got, you
plus, I
know,
want to continue my mission of reading every John Steinbeck book, but
dude.
I'll
I
get
mean,
there.
I'll find you there at the grave, man. Because you'll get through the books,
Yeah.
and then I'm sure he's got short stories. I'm on that mission with Vonnegut, and it's like, dude, I
Oh,
can't
me
find
too. I
the
love Kurt. I
ending,
just
dude.
picked up one. What have you been reading of his?
I just read Breakfast of Champions. I just bought his short stories
I
book,
haven't
so I'm
read
just
that
about
one.
to fucking dive into the short stories.
Which
Uh,
one? Wampeter something in Grand Floridians
no,
or
dude,
Welcome
it's
to the
like this.
Monkey House?
It's like, well, it's all of them, man. It's like this giant book of all of his short stories, and
Dude,
I've
that
got it.
I read a few of his books of short stories. It's so amazing
I
because
can't wait,
hi-
man.
yeah, it's like his novels. It's like, where the hell did he come up with this, and how did he like make it into a full length
Right?
novel?
Yeah.
And then you get
But
the
like
short
full
stories,
length
and it's
novel
like,
is almost a compliment because they're all 112 pages. They're
yeah,
short
true.
stories extended.
But it's fun to see the ones that like he got a couple pages into and was like, I don't know if I can play this one out.
I don't know if there's a second act.
Oh
Yeah,
man, I want
yeah.
to read everything he's written. I
Oh
love
man,
that
have you
guy.
read Breakfast of Champions?
No, I haven't.
Ah man, light read, super easy, super quick, super breezy. I'll give it to you. I've got it.
Have you read the one that he put out? It was like the last book he ever published, and it like he didn't write a book for like 25 years or something like that. And then he wrote one that was more of like a commentary on all of the ideas he had had. And this
Oh,
one
I've
came
heard
out like
about
during
this,
the
but
Bush
I've never read
administration.
it. No,
Yeah, and it
what's it
like looks
called?
back on all of his. It's like if you had George Orwell like write now about all of his predictions,
Right. No, I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I got super into Vonnegut because I read The Cat's Cradle and
That's the first
Slaughterhouse
one I read too.
Five, um, and all of the like classic Vonnegut that you can read. But man, like all of his shit, it's funny.
It's hilarious.
It's hilarious, and it
And it's so insightful as well. It's like
yeah.
it's entertainingly insightful. There's one short story where he writes about people at some point figuring out that they can like exit their body and just be a floating soul without the
Oh yeah, that shit's wild, dude.
yeah. It's like, man, I have those ideas, but
It's
I don't
kind of
write
like
it out in 8 pages.
you've read Kafka.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
not
like
much.
did you ever read his like parasite-ish one where it's like people become like weird moths or whatever? It's like an 80-page short.
Metamorphosis?
Yeah, Metamorphosis. What is it? Where
Yeah, the
like
guy like wakes up in his bed and he's a bug
yeah, he's like a cockroach or something.
and he's like stuck on his back. Yeah.
Yeah, like some of his shit reminds me of that kinda, but it's also way more hilarious. I wanted to talk to you about the books you gave me for Christmas, and in particular the Steinbeck book you gave me, and just like how fucking relevant that story is now.
In dubious
You know,
battle.
yeah, in Dubious Battle, where you're dealing with, and you know, I don't think people really think about labor in the way that they thought about it back then, but it's true, man. Like, fucking, you might not get actually physically killed, but you get financially murdered by industry if you're contrarian to them. Like, so I kind of see it sort of not firsthand, but I see it in everyday life, based on the job that I do, where if you are fucking like, I'm not gonna fucking work for Amazon.
No fucking way. I hate when I have to order something like my dog flea shit on Amazon.
Right. And like you have to deal with them, and like, there's gotta be these fucking people out there who are like, I'm not gonna fucking do it. I'm not going to fucking bend over to them. And I'm not going to work for Walmart. And I'm not going to work for Target. I'm not going to do that shit because all they do is fuck your ass and make you buy from them, right?
Yeah.
Um, and they don't get murdered like they used to back in the day when you read like a book like In Dubious Battle where, the people who, you
Where you
know,
get marked as a red and like people try to
right,
run you out of
picketed
town.
against them. They actually legitimately killed people.
Yeah.
They don't kill people. They do something worse. They emasculate them and financially destroy them. And then these people become homeless or they become financially unstable and they become independent of their own capability to survive. And that shit is fucking bad, you know?
It's
And it
not humane.
controls the country. And it's just like these major farms controlled the country back in the early 1900s. We're in the early 2000s, and the fucking internet is controlling
Well, it's just
everything.
another thing they keep out of the history. It's like we don't learn about the labor revolts. We don't learn about like the huge labor strikes in our country because people like they don't want people to hear that and realize that if we stand up collectively, we can make a change. It's like,
Right. Well, and you don't hear about it or read about it, right? Like, I'm in grade school, or not grade school, I'm in high school, and they're like, we're going to read The Grapes of Wrath.
yeah.
And I'm like, great. I think that's a great Steinbeck book, and I love the book. But
Yeah,
you
but it
want to
makes
know what The
kids
Grapes
hate
of
reading.
Wrath doesn't have? Yeah, it makes kids hate reading because it's 400 pages long. And you want to know what it doesn't have? A revolt.
Yeah,
It just has, you know what it has? A bending over exception of fate.
exactly.
That's what The Grapes of Wrath represents, right? And I
Yeah.
love it, and I think it's a great book, and it's important to history, but it's an exception of fate where you don't read In Dubious Battle.
Yeah, they don't give you that because they know you hear that and you're going to be like, I can stand up for myself. I can.
Right.
I don't have to get
Who wants to
beaten
stand
down
on
by the
their own
man.
feet? Yeah.
God, if you could raise enough hell in that regard, think about how many people. Like you watched it at the Capitol building. When you get enough people together, God, you can do
Right.
crazy stuff. Like
And I'm not saying that those people were justified, but I'm just
no,
saying that
no,
you
but it's
get
just like
enough people
to
together.
do anything.
No, I mean, I totally agree, and it's just like that's what I mean, I just love that you gave me that book and I got to read it and I learned so much from it, man. I mean, you have such this verbose sort of or not verbose might be the wrong word, but just like this plethora of reading history where you have great insight on a bunch of
I
stuff.
mean,
So I'm always curious to
it
pick your brain
actually it
about it.
relates to everything that we talked about because I dove so heavily into reading after college because I I saw it as everything stems back to self betterment. Like as I said, you go out and you become the person you want to be every day. And I saw
Sure.
reading as like if I'm sitting here on my phone, I'm not getting any smarter unless I'm like googling stuff and retaining that. But if I sit down and read a whole book, I'm going to gain all the knowledge out of it. And then I just started reading as many books as I could. And it's like it's just such a simple way to make yourself a better like you start and finish a book, no matter what it is, you gain something from it and you've exercised your brain in
And
such
you're
a way that
better
you've
for it.
grown. Yeah.
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 All right, well, I think I'll wrap the conversation
Perfect.
right around there, dude.
That was
It was
fantastic,
dope.
Charlie.
That was fantastic.